as well as reading some Scottish bedtime stories to you. I thought I could brush your hair, combing it gently to help you feel extra relaxed tonight. Just brushing as we go. So sit back, get cozy and comfy, and I'll begin. Tonight's story is from Aberdeenshire. The giant with the 3 golden hairs, or the Seelie cap. When Jack was born into the safety of his mother's loving arms, he had no idea of the adventures that lay before him. His weary parents only hoped there would be enough food to fill yet another mouth. For Jack was the 12th son of a 12th son, born to a poor woodcutter and his wife. There mustn't have been much to do up in Scotland in those days. Unlike the other parents, this child was born with a Seelie cap that covered his head. The skin was removed by the midwife and placed reverently into the mother's hands. "Dinna lose this Seelie cap," she said, "for your son is born lucky, and this is a charm that will keep ill awa fae him." Ruling over the land was a cruel and merciless king. Word came to his ear of the child that had been born with good fortune smiling on him. In fact, it was said that the wise woman, the spaewife, on seeing the bairn, had pronounced that he would one day marry the king's daughter and sit on the throne. Outraged, the king decided he would go to see the child for himself. Making his excuses to his courtiers, the king left his castle behind him and dressed as a rich merchant with a cart and a horse. He arrived at the forest where the poor family dwelt. He was taken into the crowded home and fed by a tired, thin woman. As he ate the simple fare, his eyes darted around the room and alighted upon a well-worn cradle in the corner. "You've a lot of parents." "Aye," said the mother, with a gentle smile. "Another een newly born too." I might struggle with this. It's written in Scots, you see. "May I see?" asked the man. She nodded and brought over a warmly wrapped and sleeping bundle. Her eyes shining, she said, "This is our youngest son." The king made appropriate murmurs of appreciation. "Another child to tak care o'. That must be a thocht." I don't know what that means. He caught the fleeting shadow of worry that crossed the mother's face and spoke again, silkily. "You know, I havenae bairns of my own. I would gladly tak this small lad and raise him. Sounds like a very crafty king. The look of horror that crossed the mother's face only made the king more determined. By the time the woodcutter had reached home, the king had almost persuaded the mother. The two parents anxiously spoke together, but agreed it would be in their son's best interests to be raised by the merchant. Oh no, I didn't see that coming. The king left a heartbroken family with a satisfied smile on his face, and a full belly, might I add. And in the cart, the crude wooden cradle with a baby snuggled down within, his sealy cap hidden beside him. It was not long before the king found what he was looking for, a deep ravine which rushed through a roaring river. Without a second thought, the cruel man heaved the cradle and its contents over the cliff and watched as it smashed into the river and disappeared below the surface. Well pleased with his day's work, probably the first day of work he's ever done, the king set off for home. But had he stayed, he would have seen the cradle re-emerge at the surface, buoyed like a cork, and the child in the sealy cap, although soaking wet, driven downstream in their makeshift vessel. Some hours later, a miller was woken by the sound of screaming. Rising, the man made his way down to the mill stream, and there, swirling in the shallows, was a cradle, and from within came the indignant screams of a wet and hungry bairn. Bairn just means child, by the way, if you haven't seen my Scottish trigger words video. The miller and his wife were a childless couple, and happily welcomed the river child into their home, bringing him up as their very own. The river child, it sounds very whimsical. Years later, the king was out hunting, and after a long day, tired and thirsty, he came upon a mill where he was welcomed in and given refreshment by the wife and her handsome son. "That's a fine boy you have there, madam," the king said, smiling his thanks as the lad refilled his cup of ale. "Thank ye, sir," said the mother, smiling proudly. "This is Jack, our lad fae the river." "Fit do you mean?" asked the king. Well, this is definitely a story from Aberdeen, as you would probably only find Aberdonians using the word fit. What do you mean? Fit do you mean? Well, many years ago, a cradle was swept downstream, and we found Jack lying inside. We brought him up as our own. The king managed to look interested and hide that anger and dismay that seethed in his breast. He looked at Jack and felt hate fill his heart, but his words were warm and friendly. "Jack, you're a fine-looking lad. How would you like to come and work for me? Perhaps you could be a sodger or work in my palace." The king could be very persuasive, as we already realise, and by the time the miller had come home, it was all but decided that Jack would enter the king's service. I don't know how this king does it. "Jack, can you write?" "No, sire," the lad said, his cheeks reddening. "Dinna worry, son," the king said genially. "I'm going to be hunting for a few more days, so I'll write a letter to my queen, which you must take straight to her when you arrive." Yes, your majesty," said Jack, overcome by the sudden change in circumstances and not sure how he felt about them. He should have slept on it, I think. Amidst much sadness and promises to return, Jack set off the next day with a satchel of food, the sealed scroll for the queen, and his sealy cap placed carefully in his jacket pocket. The lad had been given directions, and by nightfall he guessed he was about halfway to the palace. Rain was falling heavily, and seeing a light from a house, he approached the door and knocked. It was opened cautiously, and a frightened woman squinted out into the darkness. "Good evening. May I come in?" "No," she cried, and slammed the door in Jack's face. In the face of a handsome laddie like that. The rain was driving down, and Jack was soaked, so he knocked again. This time more insistently. Again the door opened. "Please," he said, "I'm soaking. Just a warm by your fire. That's all I ask." The woman looked at the lad, his fair hair plastered to his pale, pleading face, and relented. "On your ain heed be it then." She pulled the door wide for him to enter. With great relief, Jack felt the warmth of the fire beckoning, and soon his wet clothes were off. Steady on. And he was wrapped in a rough, homespun blanket, with the woman clucking over him and plying him with hot soup. She changed her tune pretty quickly. Snug, warm and full, Jack lay down on the stone hearth and immediately fell asleep. Later, the door opened again, and a troop of men entered, all weary, soaked, and in a foul mood. They were robbers and had suffered a bad day. Maybe they didn't get very lucky with their robbing. I struggle to feel bad for them. When they saw Jack at the fireside, their first thought was to kill him. They seemed like really bad guys. But the woman pleaded with them and showed what she'd found in Jack's pocket. Wheel, said the leader quietly. Never seen a sealy cap before. I don't even know what a sealy cap is. I'm just going to admit that. I should be doing my research before I start reading. But then it's not as fun. Anyway. Lads, we must treat this lad with respect and look after him. And see if it else was in his pocket, said the woman, passing over the sealed scroll to the man. All weariness forgotten, the thief sat down at the table and rubbed his damp hands dry. Then carefully he unpicked the seal, opened the scroll, and he read, "My dear, when this vagabond hands you this scroll, listen to this, lads. Please have him executed forthwith, your loving husband, King John." The robber whistled. This lad has made an enemy of the king, and we all are we not, lads? Aye, the men answered, grinning. They found a kindred spirit. When Jack awoke the next morning, the woman was stroking the fire, and there was breakfast laid out on the table for him. His clothes had been dried and neatly folded, and he checked the pockets to make sure the letter and his sealy cap were still in place. After a good meal, he thanked the woman, who smiled at him fondly, and on he went. He arrived at the palace, and on producing the scroll with the king's seal, he was taken directly to the queen's chambers. He bowed low and presented the letter to Her Majesty. A little confused, the queen opened the scroll, and this is what she read. "My dear, when this fine lad hands you this scroll, please have him married to our daughter forthwith. He has proved himself to be a true and worthy man of her love. Your loving husband, King John." The queen was not one to disobey her husband, and immediately set about arranging the wedding, which took place the following morning. For Jack and the princess, their marriage was not a burdensome demand, for one look had been enough to know how they felt about each other. She must have been a look or two. The king arrived home the following day to find himself in the midst of great joy and feasting. On questioning his wife, his face took on a look that chilled the queen's heart, and she knew fear. But as a cloud passes from the sun, the king quickly recovered and gallantly welcomed his new son-in-law, despite noting with disgust the look of love between Jack and his daughter. It's turning out to be quite romantic. Later in the evening, when much wine had been drunk and everyone was mellow, the king said mildly, "Ye ken, Jack, as my son-in-law, it would have been customary for ye to achieve some great feat to win my daughter's hand. Would ye be willing to please me by doing this?" Jack did not notice that anxious look that passed between his wife and mother-in-law. "Of course, sire, anything for you." "Good, Jack. In that case, I would like you to find the giant with the 3 golden hairs and bring those hairs to me." "Where do I find this giant, sire?" "O'er hill and moor, through glen and forest, until you reach the great loch. On an island in that loch is where the giant lives. Very well, your majesty, said Jack, uncertain of his capabilities. I will leave at first licht. There was a sad parting between the newlyweds as Jack, uncomfortable on horseback, set out on his next adventure. He travelled far, and by evening came to a village where he found hospitality for the night. However, he was struck by how dour the villagers were, and inquired as to why. Dour or dour means to be sour-faced, down in the dumps, grumpy. Och, said one man, this village was renowned for its wine. Oh, that's the reason. Wine that flowed reed and the rich fae that mountain in the village square. But noo it's dried up, and we dinna ken why, and noo we've nae wine, and Aberdeen's miserable. I will translate. Oh, said one man, this village was renowned for its wine. Let's not do that. Wine that flowed red and rich from the fountain in the village square. But now it's dried up, and we dinna ken, and we don't know. Let's start again. Oh, said one man, this village was renowned for its wine. Wine that flowed red and rich from that fountain in the village square. But now it's dried up, and we don't know why. And now we have no wine, and everybody is miserable. Classic Scots getting a bit upset about the lack of alcohol. Weel, said Jack stoutly, I am journeying far to the giant with the 3 golden hairs, and it is said he kens mony things hidden frae man. If I can, I will find out and come back and tell you. So the giant knows things, so perhaps he knows what's happened to the wine. That's what Jack's getting at there. The next day he travelled on, and by nightfall arrived at another village, and saw how sad the villagers were here too. One woman told him, for years we've had a wonderful apple tree, and in season it bore golden fruit, enough to bring riches and happiness to each and every one. At least these people are sad about their rotten apples rather than alcohol. Maybe they just wanted to make cider, I don't know. But these last 2 years there's been nae fruit, and we dinna ken why. Weel, said Jack, I'm awa to see the giant with the 3 golden hairs, and if I can, I'll ask the reason for this and come back and tell you. Some days later, Jack saw he was nearing a huge silver loch. Far out over the water, he can see an island. There was a small ferry boat waiting at the shore, and in it a disagreeable-looking man, surrounded by a huge accumulation of wealth, coins, gold cups, and jewels. Good day, sir, said Jack politely. Can you please row me to the island? Get in then, and that'll be 1 coin, said the man grumpily. Jack paid his fare, stepped onto the boat and sat down. looking around at all the riches piled around him. "May I ask ye a question, sir?" The ferryman looked up at Jack from beneath his darkened, furrowed brow. "Aye?" "Why, when you have all this wealth, are you still a ferryman?" It's a bit cheeky. Bold, but I like it. The man let out a huge sigh. "Aye, if you could tell me who to leave this life, lad, I would gladly gie you a' these riches. This is an enchanted boat, and I am trapped, rowing it, for I dinna ken who to break the spell." "Dearie me," said Jack, shaking his head. "Well, I'm awa' to see the giant with the 3 golden hairs, and if I can, I'll find out and tell ye on my return." "If ye return," said the man moodily. "Mony day not, ye ken. Many people don't return, you know," as is the translation. Jack was silent for the rest of the journey, wondering what fate awaited him. From the shore, it did not take Jack long to reach the giant's huge, dark castle. When he rapped on the heavy oak door, the sound echoed within. The door opened slowly, and there, to his surprise, was a small woman. "Oh," said Jack, "good day. What are ye doing here, lad?" said the woman worriedly. "The king has sent me to get 3 golden hairs frae the giant who bides here." The woman looked horrified. "The king sent ye to your death, you mean?" Then, with surprising strength, she grabbed Jack's coat and hauled him in through the door. "Have ye any idea o' the danger you're in, laddie?" she barked as she dragged Jack through to the kitchen. "I'm beginning to," he said meekly. At the fear in his voice, the woman looked at him, and her angry expression softened. "You're just a bairn, look at ye." And with that, she sat him down, and Jack told her his story of his saily cap and his journey, marrying the king's daughter, and how he had come to be at the giant's castle. When he had finished, the woman looked at Jack. "Well, I think I'll just have to help you, lad. Now the giant will be returning soon, and ye must hide, or else he'll hae you for supper." It was a few minutes later that there was a huge wrenching of the door, and a voice roared, "Woman, where is my supper?" Thundering footsteps deafened Jack as the giant trudged through to the kitchen. The woman rushed around, speaking soothingly to the huge ogre. Jack could hear sounds of food being placed before the giant, and then slurps and crunching, a bit like a mukbang, as he ploughed his way through 6 oxen. Replete at last, the giant belched an almighty belch. "Now, woman, croon me to sleep." The giant lay down on the ground, his huge, ugly head heavy in the little woman's lap. At once she began singing softly, and very quickly Jack could hear the sound of snoring. Then, "Ow! What did ye do that for?" The woman had pulled out one of the giant's golden hairs. "Oh, sorry, my dear, it was a fly. I thought it would wake you, so I tried to slap it away," she said, clever and cunning, as she stuffed the golden hair into her apron pocket. "Noo, you're a wee bit wakened. Could you tell me something that's been puzzling me?" "Fit?" asked the giant gruffly. "The village that has a wine fountain. Fit why does the wine nae longer flow? There's a toad underneath the fountain. If they dig it out, the wine will flow again. Noo, let me sleep." So they've got a big drunken toad guzzling all the wine under the fountain. Soon snores could be heard again, followed by another huge yelp from the giant. "Woman!" he roared. "What are ye doing?" "Oh, I'm sorry, my dear. It was a spider that time." She placed the second golden hair in her pocket. "But as you're wakened, can you please tell me why the villagers with the golden apple tree no longer hae any fruit?" I almost tripped up on the words there. "No longer hae ony fruit" is what's been written. "There's a rat gnawing at the roots. If they remove it, the tree will bear fruit again. Now, let me sleep." For the third time, the sound of snoring filled the kitchen, only to be followed by an earth-quaking screech. "Again? Oh, my dear, that was a nasty ant that time. It was just a way to bite you." She tucked the third hair away. "But as you're wakened, you ken the ferryman?" "Aye." "How can he leave his boat?" "Ah, he must dee his hound owner the oars to another, and he will be free. Noo, you maun let us sleep." Let me translate. "All he must do is hand over the oars to another, and he will be free. Now, come on and let me sleep." The woman hurriedly began to stroke the ogre's face once more, singing softly until his loud snores drowned out her voice. Very carefully, she took the 3 golden hairs from her pocket and handed them to Jack, who had slipped out from his hiding place. With a mouth, "Thank you," and a grin, he turned and made his way quietly from the castle. When Jack reached the ferryman, the man looked up at him in amazement, and hope was in his eyes. "You made it, lad. Well, did he tell you the answer?" "Tak me to the far shore and I promise I'll tell you," said Jack. He's wisening up a little bit now, isn't he, Jack? When he hopped out of the boat onto the sand, Jack turned to the man. "The next man that seeks the ferry, gie him the oars, and the enchantment will be broken, and you will be free to gang where you please. ferryman's eyes filled with tears of gratitude. "Och, lad, I dinna ken who to thank ye, but noo you maun tak these riches. I'm sick to death of them." So the ferryman gave Jack all the riches to say thank you, in case you didn't get that. When Jack arrived back at the castle, he was leading his horse, for he had bought a cart to contain all the riches he'd been given. Not only had the ferryman insisted on giving him all he had, but the villagers whose apple tree now flourished had gratefully laden him with golden fruit. From the other village, he'd been gifted with many bottles of the richest red wine. Sounds like a very worthwhile trip. The princess, the queen, and the courtiers at the palace were overjoyed to see Jack return, but the king was not. Here we go. Jack presented his father-in-law with the 3 hares, but he was not interested in them and cast them aside. Instead, he looked with jealousy on the riches Jack now possessed. "Where did you take all this from?" he growled. "These treasures were given to me, your majesty, and thanks to you and the giant with the golden hairs, I have made many friends on the road." Many friends on the road. The next day, the queen discovered that the king had gone. He had decided to journey to seek riches for himself, with help from the giant on the island. His envy of Jack gnawed at him, and his greed for possessions consumed him. He passed through the villages where Jack had been so welcomed, but his bitter gaze was seeking riches, and he found none in the smiles and kindness people showed. When the king eventually reached the great loch, he found the ferryman waiting in his empty boat, a smile on his face. He's still a ferryman, even though he's free. Approaching, he snarled, "You there, I am your king. You'll row me over to that island, recht nu." "Yes, your majesty, of course," said the ferryman merrily. "If you can just hop into the boat and hold the oars for just a wee moment." Now I understand. At the palace, the queen, the princess, and Jack waited in vain for the king to return. When it appeared that he had gone for good, there was no great mourning in the castle, but rather the joyful coronation of a new king and queen. The couple had wonderful children of their own, and Jack's parents were brought to stay at the palace. And so it was that Jack and his queen lived contented and ruled wisely for the rest of their days. Now bear with me just a wee moment until I find out what the sealy cap is. Now, after consulting with ye olde Google, it seems as if a sealy cap is quite literally just what the book describes at the start of the story. A child born with a sealy cap that covered its head, so like a membrane of sorts on top of the child's head. So let that be a lesson to you. If you have any loose bits of skin hanging off of you, don't be so quick to throw them away, for you may just find that said skin might bring you some good fortune and luck. That might have been my favourite story from this book so far. And I hope you enjoyed it too. And that you can now fall asleep dreaming of giants with 3 golden hairs, men in boats filled with riches, and a handsome lad with a sealy cap. Oh, and a drunken toad, that's my favourite part.